In recent years, during the latter part of 4th gen and the start of 5th gen, we've seen a huge number of groups creating more and more merch to keep fans interested and buying more. It's no longer optional for groups to have light sticks, more like mandatory. It's now normal to sell concert DVDs for extreme prices. It's normal to do season's greetings content, and it's normal to even have birthday merch for each of the members in a group. But there's another thing that is making companies more and more money and is something that is becoming more and more common. Something that I have found very interesting because I think it's become so generic that only a few groups are interesting. And I mean a few. That is K-pop animal mascot plushies. More and more groups these days have been coming out with plushies and lines of other merch that feature animal mascots for each of the members. The plushies are obviously the big sell, although keychains, stickers, tote bags, pencil cases, and photo card holders are just some of the other merch items that have been branded with these mascots. Now, these plushies are interesting because they do, of course, make groups money, and they are yet another overpriced thing which companies will create to create hype and identification of fans with their biases. But I personally think they've become more and more boring and generic as they've become more and more popular, and now there are only a few interesting lines out of many groups. I follow a lot of groups, and it's got to the point where I see another group in my feed announce a new plushie line, and instead of feeling excited, I feel annoyed and bored, because I know there's a 99% chance that these plushies will be basically interchangeable with those for another group. In this video, I'll give a brief history of the development and growth of these plushies as a merch item K-pop groups routinely put out, including a relatively comprehensive list of groups who currently have them. Then I'll discuss how and why I think they've become stale, and will give a quick analysis of the few that I think are actually interesting, with honourable mentions. If I missed any, tell me about them in the comments and I'll respond with my thoughts. So with that said, let's get into the history of these plushies. The history of these plushies can be hard to find specific details about online. Very few sites show when plushies were announced, but thank you to everyone on this Reddit thread who helped me try and get some kind of idea about a rough timeline. Considering how many people from different fandoms came to chime in and give opinions, I think this is a relatively comprehensive list and timeline. But of course, take everything with a little grain of salt. The general consensus is that BAP were the first idol group to release a full line of these plushies, sometime in 2014, where they apparently were sold at the group's tours. However, 2PM's Taecyeon had also apparently had an individual line which dropped in 2013, although that was just for one member, not the whole group. The rest of 2PM got plushies with the ZooPM line, but apparently this was also in 2014, so Taecyeon's individual line would be the first instance of these plushies, followed by BAP and the rest of 2PM. These two lines seem to have little visibility these days, which makes sense since both 2PM and BAP are second-gen groups and aren't as active anymore. And although you can still buy ZooPM plushies from JYP's website, I don't think BAP's Matoki plushies are available anymore. After these two groups, we get groups like GOT7, who released their plushie line along with an accompanying show around 2015, and groups like EXO and Big Bang, who apparently released their plushie lines in 2017. 2017 is when we get to probably the most important plushie line on this list. Unsurprisingly, it's BTS. Why are BTS the most important? Well, I would argue they're in the group of the most important. 2PM and BAP were the ones who pioneered this concept, and thus opened up the field for the groups that followed. However, BTS were the ones who popularized the idea, and who showed that these plushie lines could be incredibly lucrative and diverse. Let's take a moment to talk about BT21. In 2017, BTS started a collaboration with Line Friends, a set of characters used as messaging stickers owned by the massive Japanese company Line. You may have heard of them. They own tons of merch, they have a popular messaging app in Asia and internationally, and they've expanded into other areas too, including digital comic distribution and on-demand video. such as Line TV, which a certain subset of you watching this video may have used a lot of for its very high proportion of free-to-watch BL series. Wow, the K-pop BL pipeline is never ending, but that's a subject for another day. Anyway, BTS had a collaboration with Line Friends where the members each designed a Line character. Apparently the goal wasn't just to create avatars of the members, but instead to have them participate in the whole process of creating unique characters, which, I mean, they definitely ended up unique. There's an entire video series on YouTube which details the creation of BT21, leading up to the Line's launch with Line Friends in October of 2017. I'll discuss more of the unique details later, but this is a line which has become monumental in the K-pop industry and is so well known that I would say a good chunk of K-pop fans know which members are represented by which character, and subsequently, more so than other groups, the characters have become stand-ins for the actual members themselves, including developing with them. For instance, Mang being able to take off their mask, reflecting J-Hope's growing confidence. And fun fact, technically I think all of the BT21 characters are non-binary. There's a moment during production where all of the members say they don't want them to be a particular gender, but they're also occasionally referred to as he, so it's not like a super strict thing about them. Another fun fact is that this is one of the few lines where the fandom is also represented. Although not as well known, BT21 does have an 8th member, a robot called Van, which represents ARMY, and which protects the members and acts as the spaceship alien Tata used to come to Earth. So basically BT21 were super cute and super compelling, and they were separated enough from BTS that anyone could enjoy them and appreciate them. There's a clip that's gone around lately of a lady being happy when she obtained a Santa dog, the Santa dog in question being Jimin's Chimmy wearing a red hat. BT21 also came out with lots of merch and publicity. They were used to advertise services in Korean airports, they were used on face masks, they had plushies and mobile messaging stickers, they had cushions and keychains, coin pouches, mugs, notebooks, stickers, slippers, and more. The sheer quantity of things you could get with BT21 on them is insane, and considering you're probably more likely to get one of your bias, someone could have their literal entire life be filled with products representing their bias. And even better, they're relatively subtle products. Everyone else thinks you're just obsessed with cute blue koalas, but actually ARMYs know you're an RM fan. Am I exposing myself? Although BT21 initially launched with a relatively small number of products, I think one of the things that have kept this line going strong and kept it so popular is threefold. First, obviously BTS are popular, hence their plushie line is popular. Duh. Second, BT21 is constantly updated with new products and designs, introducing the families of the members and updating designs, such as when Mang removed their mask. Introducing new products helps keep people interested for longer, and of course means collectors will buy more stuff. Finally, the BT21 characters have connected with fans, and are far more fleshed out than many other mascot characters. To take a well-known example, Leebit. Lots of people attribute devilish and sarcastic character traits to Leebit, right? But why? Well, because people impress Lino's personality onto him and the personality of Lino's fans, which often mirrors their idols, and because he just kind of has that kind of face. There is no storyline that says Lino is a savage king, he just got that image by association. On the other hand, the BT21 characters have been given a life of their own with lines updates. They all have their own backstories and entire families with their own personalities that don't necessarily match the members, and that's not something you can say for all of these lines. Because of this, each character has their own development. Tata needs to find connections, Mang needs to gain confidence and unmask, Shuki needs to chill, and so on. This means fans have found the characters to be a source of comfort, something which I think is exemplified by Koya and Chimmy's music playlists available on YouTube, where all of the comments are ARMYs comforting each other and talking about how much they love and appreciate BTS, and especially of course RM and Jimin. This is very wholesome and expresses the crux of BT21's success, I think. Good marketing and good connections with fans. This may seem like a tangent, and it kind of is, but it's also important to understand, because this shows how and why BTS and their plushies were just a bit above the rest, and thus why they became popular. This means that BTS's plushies became the standard, and a lot of groups who've released plushies since have done similar things. Full-sized plushies, minis, keyrings, and photo card holders seem to have become the main merch, most of which, I believe, originated with BT21. After BTS showed this model could be successful, more and more groups started to release them, including Astro in 2020, Stray Kids in 2021, and aespa, Blackpink, and Red Velvet in 2023. Keep in mind that all of these dates are rough since, again, it's hard to find specific information online. These days, most groups of even mediocre levels of popularity seem to have these plushies, and thus the market has become oversaturated. The big boom seems to have come in 2022-ish. After SK Zoo released, companies realised that the success of BT21 wasn't a fluke, and hence, an explosion of plushies. I was inspired to make this video by the relatively close together announcements of the plushie lines for ATEEZ and TXT earlier this year. Two groups I follow, as you hopefully know by now. This is because I thought that ATEEZ's plushies were deeply generic and boring, from a group who I would have expected to have original ones. And, in contrast, TXTs were surprisingly original, from a group who I would have expected to have generic plushies. That dissonance, and my realization that the plushies were taking over K-pop, led to this video. But we'll discuss the original and the generic later. For now, to communicate how big of a trend this has become, let me give you a big list of the groups which have plushies of some description, whether animal or human avatars. This isn't an exhaustive list. I have no doubt I've missed at least a few groups even with the help of the wider K-pop fandom, but it is a relatively comprehensive one nonetheless, and gets most of the main players. Groups that currently have plushies or similar lines include BTS, TXT, Stray Kids, ATEEZ who have a human and an animal line, SHINee, IVE, Blackpink, ENHYPEN, ITZY, aespa, TWICE, NCT Dream, NCT 127, 17, Kind of, Day6, BAP, 2PM, Gravity, Monster X, Treasure, Billy, New Jeans, LE SSERAFIM, Big Bang, ONEUS, &TEAM, Zero Base One, Kepler, The Rose, NU'EST, GOT7, Stacey, Astro, and EXO. Yeah, that's a lot of groups, and you can hopefully see that 4th and 5th gen are disproportionately represented, showing how this only really became a trend in the past few years. The past 2 years being when the majority of these were announced and released. In fact, this has become such a common trend that I wouldn't be surprised if another group announces their plushies in the time between when I record this script and release the video. It'll probably be ISNA or someone else. Actually, P1 Harmony announced figurines, but they're not plushies. So with the history of plushies over, let's discuss another reason I wanted to make this video, to discuss which ones I think are good and which ones I think are bad. I want to split this into 4 parts: the super unique or original ones, the somewhat original ones, and the derivative or boring ones. I'll also add a qualifying segment for lines I don't know much about, since, well, I don't closely follow all of these groups, so you can take my thoughts on these particular lines with a grain of salt. Keep in mind, K-pop fans, that these are all my opinions which will definitely be biased in some way, but I will obviously try and back them up with facts. I know very little about the following lines, although I did do my best to research them for this video. ATEEZ's Teasmon, Billy, GOT7, NU'EST, Red Velvet, SHINee, IVE, Blackpink, ITZY, TWICE, NCT Dream and NCT 127, 17, Day6, 2PM, Gravity, Monster X, Big Bang, ONEUS, The Rose, Stacey, Astro and EXO. I will still categorise these plushies based on my research on them, but take what I say about them, as I said, with a grain of salt, especially if you know more about them that could make them more interesting. So let's get into it. Let's start with my criteria. I had a few things I looked at with various levels of weighting. Some of these were naturally influenced by bias, but I'll try and justify my choices when I get to each group. Not all of these applied to every single group. My criteria included whether or not the body plans for each plushie in a line are unique, and whether the designs were unique compared to other ones in the industry, whether the plushies looked well made or not, whether they were the only plushies available or also other merch, and whether this merch was the same as other groups or was unique, whether the plushies had any sort of story or backstory and how developed this was, also whether this was reflected in their designs. whether the designs, story, and concept of the plushies reflected that of the group, whether the plushies represented the individual members well, i.e. are they all recognisably different from each other, and do they have anything that signals which member they are. Animal emoticon plushies got the obvious advantage here since fans tend to recognise each emoticon, but that didn't give those lines a free pass. Whether there were other unique factors in the design, such as including mythical creatures, odd accessories, or unique animals. Most of the plushies in this list were just generic animals, so I looked at which one had less generic animals. Generic animals being things that almost all groups have as an emoticon for some member or include in their lines. Things like cats, dogs, chickens, ducks, wolves, lions, bunnies, penguins, and foxes are very common animals for groups to include, so groups that did that got negative points in my book. I also considered when each line was released. For instance, ones that were released earlier obviously got more points, since if you're the first to do something boring that later becomes common and generic, you're still the first, right? So let's start with a rapid-fire run-through of the boring or otherwise bad ones. I like to think my bias didn't play too big of a part since 6 of my favourite groups appear in this segment. Most of these were just generic animals, as I said earlier. A lot of these plushies could be changed between groups and anyone other than diehard fans wouldn't notice. It doesn't necessarily make them bad as such, but there is literally nothing unique about them, and considering how saturated the market is for these plushies, with almost every decently successful group having one, you really have to have something that isn't generic to stand out. Groups who have generic animals include A-Teasers and Atees, Enhyphen, Anteam, Zero Base One, and Kepler. May I say that I follow all of these groups closely, so let this be a mark of my bias not showing? I was super disappointed in all of these lines, especially Anatees, which had the potential to be really cool, but which were just really boring and generic. Zero Base Ones are also literally so generic that I couldn't even tell which member was assigned to which plush. I thought this one was Gunnox, but it turns out it's Ricky's, I think? Now onto generic animals, which I actually have things to say about. Blackpink had a line of generic animal plushies for one of their tours, I believe. They were super generic and they all looked the same except for the ears and the accessories. I can't tell who is who and they don't suit the concept of the group. Red Velvet are the same, the only interesting thing is that they have a purple bear instead of a brown one. Red Velvet also get an honourable mention for Revev the robot, designed by some of the members, who is pretty cool and unique, but he isn't a plushie and he isn't sold, so it doesn't count. Itzy's Twinsy are slightly more interesting than other plushies, but that's only because I think the hoodies look super ugly, so not for a good reason. NCT next. Both NCT 127 and NCT Dream have generic plushies. Dreams have unique poses, but are otherwise generic, other than the one that seems to be a ghost, maybe? They also look cheap. 127 have a cheetah or a snow leopard, I think, which is a unique animal to have, but everything else is boring. Next, the 17 collaboration with Sega, which literally only produced 13 slightly different looking cats. I have no clue who is who, they don't express any personality, and they are so forgettable. The only way I could extend this to the group's concept is that each of the members is valued equally, and all of these plushies are pretty equal. But then these are forgettable, so it kind of implies the members are also forgettable when you look at it that way. Similarly, forgive me for mispronunciations, Monster X's Two Tuck Gum plushies are all the same animal and aren't even recognisable as particular members. New Jeans also are literally just the same rabbit repeated. Day 6's plushies have interesting outfits, and that's it. Le Sserafim had a collaboration with Overwatch which was also unique, but it was a pretty boring collaboration, especially on the plushie side of things. Treasure are generic animals with the exception of a few. They seem to have 3 different lions and have what looks like a zombie. They also have a butterfly, which is pretty cool, but otherwise this is super generic. Shiny are an odd one. They seem to have several lines of plushies, all of which seem to be pretty generic, although points for having multiple lines, I guess. Also points for including Jonghyun in them, but that's to be expected from Shiny. One Us's USS plushies literally have 2 that look almost identical. Stacy's have some unique accessories and the motif of white, but nothing else. and Astro's Rorohas have a unique Squishmallow type body shape, but the animals themselves are boring, the accessories are ugly, and the plushies as a whole look uglier, cheaper, and more poorly made than Squishmallows, so you may as well just get a Squishmallow at that point, or a knockoff if you're participating in the boycott. Now, onto some special cases. ATs have 2 plushie lines, and their second, or first chronologically, one is also on the bad list. ATs just can't get a win with their plushies. This is their Teasmon line, which are all just the same character in slightly different clothing and colours. There is some vague interest in that the members designed them, and that they're a unique design, I guess, but they're all just the same dude. So an interesting idea executed in a really boring way, I guess. Something we'll see far more out of in our list of plushies. Next, EXO, whose plushies are just dudes in onesies. I don't even think the dolls have different face shapes to help us identify the members. The literal only interesting thing about this is that one of the hoodies seems to be a crocodile, an interesting animal. I suppose it's interesting that they're blending human dolls and animal plushies, but the execution was just so bad that I feel like it belongs here. And it gets worse. For many people like myself, the thing that makes EXO stand out is their interesting storyline with superpowers for each member, a concept that when they debuted was very novel and interesting. But the plushies don't even express this concept and their superpowers, which is something I would really want from a line with a group like this, and something that is also a failing of groups like ATEEZ and Hyphen and ANTEAM. Finally, Billy. I heard they had plushies which were based on each of their eras, which I thought was a super fun and unique idea, but I couldn't actually find the plushies, so I guess they get an honourable mention here. If I could have verified that, they would have been in the good category. Alright, on to the next category, the ones that are either neutral or are partially good and partially bad, or the ones where I gave them points for effort, I guess. First, aespa. Half are generic animals and half aren't. I heard that the fans didn't like these designs, but I'm unsure where I heard this from. I think they're decent. Next, GOT7. The designs themselves are pretty generic people dolls, but they have a show which is either based on the dolls or which the dolls were based on. It's called Dream Night, about a girl who has the ability to summon her favourite K-pop group, one member at a time, and of course the group is GOT7. This is pretty cool, so points for them even if the designs are generic. IVE have given us something pretty unique considering their plushies are all just animals. They each have slightly different body plans, although this effect is mostly achieved with ears and tails, and they are all hyper feminine, which fits the group's image wonderfully and which is pretty unique in the industry. ITZY have 2 plush lines. Although I mentioned Twinsy in the bad section, their other one, which I'm not sure how to say, WDZY, gets points. They have some unique designs and some of their body plans are slightly different, like this one which seems to be a cat inside a ball. However, part of the reason they're unique is for the same bad reason as Twinsy. In my opinion, these are pretty ugly. I just don't think they look good. Next, 17's emoticon plushies. 17, like many groups, made a plushie line, or at least I think they did, based on their representative emoticons. This is pretty generic. Like I said, tons of groups do it. What makes them unique and bumps them up to this tier is that they have so many members they've ended up with some odd and unique emoticons. For instance, I think S-Coups is the only cherry in the entirety of K-pop, and The8 the only frog, so a chunk of them are decently unique. Next, the Rose have person dolls, which themselves are generic, but which combined are more interesting. Each of these dolls have different facial features which presumably make them recognisable on sight to fans, although since I don't know the members of the Rose I can't verify this. They also get points for being one of the 2 bands here, the other one being Day 6. NMIXX's jellyfish are interesting too. They're a unique design in the world of K-pop plushies. I'm not sure how they're supposed to be jellyfish, and I don't know how they express the concept of the group. They also don't look very good, but they are kind of funny and they make me smile. NMIXX also gets an honourable mention for this whale plush they sell, which I believe is related to their storyline and is a symbol for the group, since it's also in their light stick. Next, Big Bang, whose dolls are literally all just the same bear with different outfits and hair. The only reason they get pushed up to this category is because they are super recognisable as each of the members, even for a non-fan like me. This probably comes from how iconic Big Bang is. However, other than this, they have literally nothing to offer. Finally, Stray Kids. Yes, SK-Zoo is mid. The concept is very generic and all of their animals are generic too. They literally just took their animal emoticons and made them into plushies, and they all are copy-pasted the same plush with occasionally different ears and eyes. This was the most boring kind of plushie that Stray Kids could have made, and since they did this before it became a trend, they didn't even need to conform to the trend. They could have done whatever they wanted, and they chose to do the most generic thing. The literal only reason Stray Kids are in this category and not the bad category is because they were the first ones to do this plushie concept with the generic animals. I think only 2PM would have preceded them. You can argue that most of the groups in the bad category copied Stray Kids, or followed the trend that Stray Kids started when SK-Zoos started going semi-viral. So they get points for being one of the first, but this is still a super boring concept. I don't remember what any of them look like other than Leebit, Wolfchan, and Changbin's pig, whose name I don't even remember. Shows how forgettable they are to non-fans. Leebit really is the star of the show, and even then it's because of the personality fans have assigned to him, not because of him himself. Alright, with a bunch of stays now upset with me, let's discuss the actually good ones, the honourable mentions for the stars of the show basically. Let's kickstart this with 17, again, making them the only group to appear on all 3 tiers in this list. 17 have this odd line they sell in their store, which includes 2 plushies, a tiger and their Carrot Bong character. The Carrot Bong is obvious. It represents the fans, which is cute and unique, since I believe the only other groups to have represented their fans are Red Velvet and BTS. The other plushie is a tiger, which I think represents the company they collaborated with, but being a tiger, it's pretty obviously associated by fans with Hoshi, so yeah, that's cute. This is a pretty unique set and is a nice way to get around the effort of designing for all 13 members plus carrots, or at least it would have been if they didn't have the other 2 lines anyway. Next is 2PM. Their line is made up of generic animals, but they were the first to do generic animals, so they get to be up here. The animals' accessories also make it obvious that this is a 2nd gen group, which I think is great. They also have tons of unique and kooky merch items, including plushies wearing fish hats, paper clips, hand towels, and more. They also have some soft plushies in a pink and white colour scheme, which is unique. Next, 17's brother group, Newest, a group lost way too soon to the greed of hype. Newest had a collaboration with Spoons, which included a cute theme song they released. The plushies themselves were unique and interesting in Kpop, especially these 2. Apparently they weren't even based on the members but just ended up suiting them anyway, which is also unique since most lines are custom designed for the members. It reminds me of Mamamoo and their radishes. The song itself is also nice and comforting. Next, Twice, who I tossed up between putting in the good tier or the neutral tier, but I pushed them up here because of their base designs and story. Twice's plushies are called Lovelies, and they have their origin in one of Twice's music videos, BDZ. In this music video, apparently the Lovelies are the source of all good things in the world, and when they are trapped, all good things go away and bad emotions rule. I disliked that they were almost all exactly the same. They're carbon copies of each other with different hair and colours. However, this was also kind of a point in their favour. It helps express how they're almost like an alien or spirit race. One way in which alien races are made to seem more exotic and odd is that their individuality is taken away, and this is the same here. They are purposefully designed with unity. They have no identifying symbols, no unique ears or other features, and so on. The combination of so many of these design choices shows that this is purposeful. Their storyline is also fun, and they remind me of comforting nostalgic childhood characters like the Teletubbies. I do say that though as someone who never actually watched Teletubbies. I wasn't allowed much TV. But still, this is good because it expresses Twice's identity as a group. They are a source of nostalgia or comfort for many and are a more light-hearted group in general. It also helps that the Lovelies have tons and tons of fun merch items which look good and are pretty minimalistic. I especially like these acrylic stand pouches, which are super cute. I also like these pin badges, which, when you collect them all, make a heart shape. Finally, for this segment, Gravity and their Sea Crew plushies. They were another one I tossed up between putting in neutral or good. They all have unique designs and body plans, and some of them are quite unique animal and design-wise, like this snake thing with a rose in its mouth. They have character and they're recognisable. For instance, I wouldn't mistake any of these for an SK Zoo. However, Sea Crew don't seem to have any storyline, and they aren't from a big enough group to have had a big impact, despite their unique designs. Now, let's get into, in my opinion, the best of the best, the cream of the crop, the stars of the show, the holy trio of epic K-pop plushies: BAP, TXT, and BTS. Three three-letter name groups, and nicely one each from 2nd, 3rd, and 4th gen. BAP are kind of obvious. Along with 2PM, they were the first group to release plushies, and unlike 2PM, theirs were a pretty unique choice. While 2PM's plushies represented the public image of K-pop as super soft and curated, BAP's plushies reflect how K-pop can also be experimental and unique, blending subcultures and musical cultures left and right, and constantly experimenting. And I think they went with a pretty good and unique idea, basically demonic rabbits, which expressed the alternate aesthetic of K-pop and which have remained unique, even with the huge number of groups making plushies these days. Next, BTS. I discussed earlier why BTS are unique. The designs are easily recognisable even by non-fans. They were designed by the members and represent their personalities and stories. They are explicitly gender neutral, making them, I think, the only plushie line like that. They have tons of merch, including some unique items and phone stickers, and they inspired the boom of K-pop plushies. And each of the characters have their own storyline, families, character arcs, and so on. Mung and their storyline especially are a masterpiece. Not only that, but even after not thinking about BT21 for months or years, I can still easily picture all of the characters in my head and know their names. Not only this, but the characters themselves are unique. A robot, a cookie, and a Mr. Fantastic-esque alien are pretty uncommon to say the least. They also have a representation of their fans, Van, which is nice and unique. Koya and Chimmy have their own comfort playlists, and the group have tons and tons of content. They have also inspired ARMY in many ways. Just one is that RM's fans grouped together to adopt a koala in the Australian zoo who was then named Koya. I could talk about BT21 and how they revolutionised K-pop plushies for ages, but I think I've started repeating myself, and they have so much content that I'd be talking forever, so I'll stop. Needless to say, I think they solidly deserve the title of the best K-pop plushies. They don't even have any competition, except for one group. Interestingly enough, their pseudo-brother group. TXT recently, at time of writing, announced their plushie line, Pubatu. I think that's how you say it. And they were what inspired this video. They're animals, yes, and for the most part they're pretty generic animals, but with an insane twist. First, some of the animals are wearing hoodies or other accessories to disguise themselves as animals. Dolls wearing hoodies isn't new, see EXO, but animals wearing the hoods of other animals is novel, outside of BT21's Mung. This instantly gives a layer of depth to the plushies and implies a personality and story. For instance, why does Yeonjun's Fennec Fox have a duck costume? What is he trying to express and hide? And Kai's penguin ghost thing is wearing an angel costume but has vampire teeth, making it seem like he's masquerading as something good when he's evil. He's also lost one wing since he's a fallen angel in the story. Ahem, reminder of TXT's storyline. These disguises, as such, that the animals are in also relate to TXT's storyline and concept. Boys, teens, and youths who need to hide their true feelings behind a mask because of their own insecurities and the stigmatizing gaze of society. Not only this, the animals themselves are relatively unique. Bombgyu's is a blend between a Maltese and a bear, and Taehyun's is part cat, part squirrel. And, like I said, Kai's is goodness knows what. To add to this, they've been given identifying marks for each member. Subin's Aegyosal, Yeonjun's beauty mark, Bombgyu's long eyelashes, Taehyun's abs, and Kai's obsession with hoodies. None of these things are things that would make non-fans recognise them, except maybe Subin, but they are cute additions and show that more effort has been put in here than is put into most groups. Finally, the big killer, the most important thing. We've already talked about storyline with Kai being an angel on the outside and a devil on the inside, but it gets better. Each of these animals has a star somewhere on their body. Stars are a symbol for TXT and have been since their debut. They represent the whole group working together and also their powers. This is cute in and of itself. It ties the plushies to TXT's storyline and concept, and to each other, making them all obviously part of the same line. You couldn't switch them out with an SK-Zoo. But it gets even better. These stars are very specifically positioned to reflect the location of TXT's curses and powers in their storyline. The storyline that their new management seems to have abandoned, by the way, but their storyline nonetheless. Subin's is on his ear, where you know his elf ears are. Yeonjin's is near his temple, where his horns sprouted from. Beomgyu's is on his back, where his quills came out. Taehyun's is in his eye, and Kai's is on his angel wing. I can't express how insane this is in words, and how many emotions it makes me feel. I'm delighted that their plushies have so much depth and are so related to their storyline. I'm intrigued about Kai's especially, which is most tightly tied to the storyline. I'm happy for the group and the fact that they seem to have got these amazing plushies, not generic ones. But I'm also incredibly angry that the plushies get to have a storyline, but TXT's music videos have kind of abandoned it. Or at least they've abandoned the original version of it. It's bittersweet, but overall, I'm pretty happy. If there is one group whose plushies can surpass BT21, it's TXT's, with this amazing line. So with that, we've taken a lovely little journey through the many plushies of Kpop, starting with the worst and ending with the best in rough order. I'd be curious to hear your opinions and whether you think my reasons are good or bad, but before you type a potentially angry comment, let me say that a plushie line being boring, bad, or otherwise generic doesn't mean it's automatically terrible and you should hate it. If you like ATEEZ's plushies or SK-Zoo or Twinsy or anything else, that's okay. You like what you like, and if it comes from your favourite group, that's even better. If you hate Hooba2 or BT21, that's okay. Our society really needs to realise that you can like something that is bad and you can hate something that is artistic and good, because quality isn't the only factor affecting interest. So with that said, let's wrap up this video. Yet another minisode that was longer than intended. I'm not even surprised at this point. Honestly, I'm just glad I managed to keep it below 10,000 words. Kpop plushies have taken over the merch market. Almost every group that seems to have even a little bit of success seems to make plushies these days, and unfortunately, many without much success. This craze originated in 2014 with the release of plushies by 2PM and BAP, and was brought into the mainstream in 2017 with BTS's BT21 and Stray Kids' SK-Zoo, which proved that this could be a financially successful model. From 2020 onwards, we saw an explosion of these plushies, which doubtlessly have made each group at least a little bit of money, but which have quickly become oversaturated and samey. Almost all of the plushies these days are generic animals, not even unique animals, and they have almost no personality or visual interest. They don't represent the members individually, they don't express the concept of the group, and they don't experiment at all. You could switch one cat plush out for another, and not only would you never know which group it belonged to or which member it belonged to, but you'd probably also forget what it looked like pretty quickly too. In this world, only a few groups stand out, and those groups are the ones which have done something odd or unique with the plushies themselves, with different species like Twice and NMIX, or who stand out because they're just straight up ugly, like ITZY. In this video, I ran through the plushies of every group I know of who has one, ranking them in tiers of bad, neutral, and good plushies, roughly from worst to best, with the cream of the crop, of course. The moral of the story is that there are a lot of bad ones, even coming from unique and popular groups like ATEEZ, and that unfortunately a lot of the unique ones come from smaller groups who will never be able to have the huge impact they need, like Gravity and Newest. When I initially intended to write this video, there were only two that I considered good, BTS and TXT, and although only BAP were added to the highest tier, over the course of researching for this video I found many more plushies who were interesting. My honourable mentions go to Twice, whose lovelies are unique, story-driven, cute, and fit the group well, but other standouts include IVE, 17, and Newest. I don't think we'll see the plushie trend go away anytime soon. Everyone loves them and they make money, so why would companies stop making them? But I really hope that in the future we see more plushies like Pubatu and less like Anites. More that express the concept and story of a group in unique ways, and less that are just emoji rip-offs. At the end of the day though, almost all of these plushies have something in common. Most of them are cute and cuddly, and really that's all you can ever ask of a plushie, isn't it? Let me leave you with this cute picture of Koya the koala. As an Australian RM biased army, I can't say how much I appreciate RM's love of koalas and animals in general, and the armies who came together to sponsor Koya, and who have come together almost every year to support animals in RM's name. If you're interested in getting behind good causes in the name of K-pop, and especially BTS, I'd recommend visiting the site One in an army-run site which holds charity fundraisers for a variety of causes, often in honour of the members' birthdays. I'm not sure how active they are right now, but they used to be very active, and they're still worth checking out. Right now it seems they're still running their March fundraiser for Sugar's birthday, which is to help fund aid to the Palestinian Trauma Clinic. If you also want to support other charities, you can check out Polished Man, which is in my community tab. And with that said, we've come to the end of this minisode. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.